episode 175? 6?
8, right?
No, not the stupid podcast. We're doing the normal episode.
No, 178.
8. So, 2,642.
Welcome by another Strongfit Podcast.
Exactly.
Basically.
And we are talking neural output today and strength. So, yeah. I was listening to, was watching a video on Elite FTS. Elite FTS is Dave Tate. He was a powerlifter under the Louis Simmons, the West Side. Yes, don't worry about it. I'll have to. You need to know West Side. If you're going to go into powerlifting, you need to go West Side. It was the crazy, not the strongest gym in the world, no matter what they say, but it was the craziest by far. If you want the strongest gym in the world, by the way, there's a long argument about that, but the original West Side was in Los Angeles, in Culver City. And I happened to be friends with the owner, the guy who created it, Joe DiMarco. He came to my gym and everything. It's who we got the bench from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he wasn't, he's 80, but he had stories on end, and he trained, Ken Patera trained there, the strongest guy of this era trained there, and he was called West Side because there was also the other gym owner's name was West, Jim West. So West and then West Side of LA, so basically became West Side. That's the original West Side. And
but you were watching a video from them?
Yeah, no, not from them, from somebody else. But by the way, Joe DiMarco was there, and he told me he saw firsthand one of his guys, whose name I forget, he was a shot putter, squat 600 pounds for 30 reps. He said he was there when he did it. Yeah. 270 kilos for 30 reps. He said he got there at rep 13 or something and was there for each rep. Yeah, he said he saw it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. So he told me some numbers from back then and stuff like that are fucking nuts. Insane stuff. Like he was a wealth of knowledge. It was crazy. Because
But how did they get the numbers so high? They had a specific training program?
He invented the box squats. Mm-hmm. He's the one who did it.
Oh.
But really, what you see out of that is, it's not the programming, it's the gym. They each push each other so hard. They created a gym culture about being strong, so strong that people push each other to the ridiculous levels. They didn't all follow the same programming. Some guys were just doing one arm press with a dumbbell while holding to a pole all the way up to 300 pounds.
They just built a community and everyone was...
They had a world record, world-class shot putters there, and then powerlifters and people. And they came to train, and they all trained as animals, and everybody got stronger. But the two things that I find so interesting about this, the first one was, it's not programming, it's the gym itself. It's a culture of the gym that matters, really, at the end. And the second part was, we always think we do better as humanity goes over time. And I'm not utterly convinced that's true. The numbers that I heard from that period of time were very, very high. They didn't have the drugs we have now. Because we're talking, what was that, 70s? Because he knew Arnold and everything. So we're talking 70s. The drugs were not what they are now. Mm-hmm. So just that alone is a very interesting idea.
Do you think they had the best generation of lifters?
At least the craziest ones, like the stories you hear from that era, like the Bill Kazmaier, like the 70s, 80s, when it comes, was the golden age of power building. Guys that were strong and putting on muscle. So extremely strong bodybuilders or very well-shaped powerlifters, depending on how you look at it. But it's the golden age of power building monsters. Yeah. Monsters in the gym. I don't think we've seen monsters in the gym in the 70s, 80s. I think we lost it. I think it's because at some point growth hormone got into bodybuilding and it became about nutrition and drugs more than it was about training. If you look in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, it was always about training. Always about training. Who could train the hardest? There's a guy named Dorian Yates who was a very famous bodybuilder. He won 6 times. 5? 6? At least 5, I think 6. And he was famous for his training sessions. it was very interesting because at the time, like, you know, you did 5 sets of 10 or whatever, and he came up, and he was doing 1 set only, 1 set per exercise, but everything in that set. So we do legs was 1 set of hack squat, 1 set of leg press, 1 set of leg extension.
And what was the idea behind that? That you just
maximum intensity.
Train like it's a competition every single day? Or?
In a way, which led to injury, by the way. But for him, it was like you have to bring the maximum intensity possible to the set, and you can't do more than 1 because how are you going to recover from it? How could you possibly do max intensity for 3 sets in a row? And if you were to do more than 1 or 2 sets, how could you recover from it?
But so that's basically building muscle without adding any volume to it.
And so
do you think is that possible?
Oh, he was a mass monster. He was the original mass monster. He started the whole thing. He was the biggest dude out there. Right, so I know, that's the question. That's always been the question.
Do you think that you have to do a certain amount of work to get to the level to be able to do that? Or do you think you can just start doing that and then...
That's always been the question. Mike Menzer is actually the one who influenced Dorian Yates. Mike Menzer was in the early 80s, right? And he was doing 1 set per body part. Max intensity, max weight, mass everything, and he had a great physique. He got robbed at the Olympia, but he had a great physique. So there's been quite a few training systems based on that. So Dave Tate out of Westside, they have a max day, right, where they just go for 1 to 3 rep max weight, 1 set. That's their max effort day.
Every week?
Every week. 1 for the lower body, 1 for the upper body. So usually on bench. But they also have the conjugate system, which means they rotate exercises, so you never, you lesser the chance of injury, you don't get burnout. But so that means what? That means bench press with bands or with chains or off a block, or, you know what I mean? And then they would vary, they have a great variance of exercise, but they had a max effort day where every week it's just 1 set and just give what you got. Try to get a PR.
What is your opinion about it?
Well, that comes down to what strength is, right? Which is what I wanted to talk about today anyway. So volume versus high intensity conjugate like variance versus linear progression. So in the old days, that's the science of stress from the 70s, is you start with, let's say, 10 reps, and then you're going to add weight in a linear fashion over 10 weeks or whatever until you get to a max. Then you rinse and repeat. That was a linear progression, typical.
Rinse
and repeat. Like just do it again.
Oh, okay.
Rest, do it again. Rinse, then repeat.
Oh, okay.
So that was a typical, and you had great powerlifter who got very successful doing that. Ed Cohen, the greatest powerlifter of all time, had a 12-week cycle with percentages, and he would calculate it to get him to a certain percentage of his 1 rep max, and then he would follow that for every competition. Didn't work every time, but he said he had entire 12-week cycle where he didn't miss a lift. Everything written on paper he did, all the way up to the assistance work. Right, so for some people it works. Like, I can't have 12 weeks planned up like that. To me it's crazy. But that's one system. That's one system in place. Another system is more like, so him, what did he do? He started with, like, 10 reps and then 8 reps, 6 reps, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then overcompensation and everything. That worked very well for him. For others, it's more like, for example, then you got the conjugate system, which is max effort day every week, and then you rotate. Usually you do the same exercise maximum 2 in a row. Usually you change every week if you're a bit more advanced.
For how long do you do that?
Always.
Always,
because they want to be at 95% at any time, which means Louis Simmons was saying, you're 3 weeks away from a competition at any moment. That means you're in shape. Yeah, it's rough. So without drugs, it's going to be a bit hard. And then they said it, they were all doing massive amount of drugs. The way they were training is kind of necessary. But that being said, like, linear progression requires drugs as well. So, I mean, for the top guys, they were doing drugs as well. Like, it's a strength sport. Like, recovery is always the key. Right, so but that's what, at the end, what matters is not your progression, is that you have one. So you can do conjugate, you can do high intensity, the different ways about that one. You can do high volume, pure linear. At the end, as long as you have a progression, it doesn't seem to matter. What matters after that is how hard you work in the gym. So having the right gym makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I can understand that very well. Like the moment I was doing the best in track was always when I had the most amazing training partners, when I felt good on the track, when it was not too much traveling time, when it was just a mixture of all those things that makes you just very comfortable in the environment. You always perform
and just
the best.
Attack it. At the end, that's what matters.
Because you look forward to the training session every single time, because it's
like Salazar, you know, like the running coach in the US who had like the Olympians. He had number 1, number 2 in the world.
Yeah.
And you know what the training session is? They run together.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they would try to beat each other every single training session.
That's
so
why we make so much progress, because we love training together
exactly.
so much, right?
At the end, honestly, to be strong is not how hard you train, because how hard you train, people think volumes, think I can't miss a session. It's not that. It's just how much are you putting into the session.
Yeah, and you can recover better if you don't end up in freeze because you don't like your training environment.
Right. For example, so then at the end, it's all neural output then. If you look at it from this perspective. So I have what is called the performance box, where I decompose things in neural output versus skill, and muscle quantity versus muscle quality. And that's how I look at either a person, a movement, a muscle group, or whatever. And
I remember.
You remember that from the seminar, right? Exactly. And so the question was always, well, what's neural output? And how do we train it? And I think really it's maybe not the question. I think it's the question. It might not be the only question, honestly, you have to answer to become strong, but I think it's the question. And then so I was watching that video from Elite FTS where they actually had a study. I did not read the story. I should have, but I didn't. Because those studies I don't find them that interesting. But they were trying to put a number as to what allows strength to go up. And then what I like is the percentages. I don't think they can be. The problem with those studies is always the same. It's a low number of people. I don't care. I did not do the story, so I don't know how many people they put it through, but they would have to go through thousands to have a clear picture. But that study gives you an overall idea about what it takes to become stronger, which I like, because actually it's exactly the performance box I talk about all the time. So they were showing like neural output was number 1 at 30%. After that, there was hypertrophy. Hypertrophy was actually a lot lower than I expected. Size of muscle, getting bigger muscle.
Sorry, maybe it's stupid.
So increasing your neural output seems to be about like the 30% of the whole thing toward getting stronger.
Yeah.
Then after that, there was increasing hypertrophy, so bigger muscle. That was going from 1 to 18%, 20%, something like in that range. So not...
Is that mean just the size of the muscle or the size of the body? Because that contains fat too, or no?
Right, usually they mean inside the muscle, they containing fat as well, right? On that one, I know by experience that we have to also, let me make sure I didn't do anything I shouldn't be doing. No. You have to understand that the squat is not the deadlift, it's not the bench press. The bench press is going to be far more susceptible when it goes up to body mass. The bigger you are, the more you move the weight. That's just the way it is. It's not true on the deadlift. Deadlift is more pure neural output. So again, I didn't read that part of the study, it doesn't matter. But you would have to take that into consideration when you look at hypertrophy. If you want to be stronger on the bench, hypertrophy is going to have a higher value than if you want to be stronger on the deadlift. So that matters.
But this is all an overall...
Yeah, it's more, look at it as a concept.
Yeah.
Right, so we're going to use the percentage they use. Are they correct? Not exactly, but like overall we can get as an idea.
So after that,
hypertrophy was starting strength, which is a good point that I never go into the performance box because I find it obvious. Where do you start?
It's a good question.
Right, and that's just genetics, talent, whatever you want to call it. Where do you start? And then after that, there was a 40% that is unexplained. And that they couldn't really figure out. And I think what that 40% is, and actually the guy was touching it even on the video, it was the capacity of the muscle to contract, which is what I call muscle quality.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about that study is that it shows the performance box, neural output versus muscle capacity. And then starting strength, but I would put skill in there when it comes to strength because it still matters. But anyway, if we look at the physique by itself, like you have muscle capacity versus neural output, which I've been talking about for a long time. We even talked about this for the assistance work. So if you look at muscle, so hypertrophy matters a bit, but not as much as you would think, right? Depending on what? Again, depending on the exercise. On the bench press, it's going to matter more than on a deadlift. But then is muscle quality. That seems to be honestly a very, very, very important thing. The problem with that is I think a lot of it is going to be genetic. Like your capacity to contract, leverage, for example, of the muscle, right? There's a leverage at the head of the femur, like, a connection that is just a millimeter more here for one person and for the other, whatever, and that's going to make all the difference in the world, leverage-wise. That one you're born with. You have it or you don't. So the leverages that you have muscle-wise, not bone-wise, muscle-wise, you're born with. That's going to be part of that 40% unexplained. And then after that is muscle quality, the capacity of the muscle to contract. There's things you can do about it, obviously, because it's a rate of contraction, right? So the way you train is going to change that. But there's also your talent as an athlete. Do you have it or can you train it? Yeah, to a certain level. After that, a lot of it is just genetics. Mm-hmm. So how much of the muscle quality can we impact becomes a very important question, right? But the other part that we have control over is neural output. That we know how to train it, we know how to get at it. And so that's where I thought was very interesting from the side of what we do. I was like, all right, neural output. So, and if you see from the conversation we're talking about, isn't everything neural output? Because, not everything obviously, but you get the idea. The quality of the gym you're in seems to matter the most. Why? Because it develops a greater fight in you from competition, environment, and everything. That's neural output. The key is always the recovery. That's the game. It's like push yourself but recover from it. So don't be in freeze. We're going back to nervous system. So that's going to be toward neural output. And then you keep finding in every single corner that neural output is something that matters the most.
Well, yeah,
I think the question
makes a lot of sense if you break it down like that. But I also think that it can be very dangerous then to just focus on the physics when you train
and not the neural output. Exactly.
Because I think that's what's happening a lot in fitness, but in every sport, is to focus on what the body needs and what the body
nutrition and all that.
But also in general, like, I'm going to do calves or this body part, this body part, and not about how you feel with it, how you recover from it. So not about the neural output.
And I think that's why we lost. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the day said, you have to learn to power clean. He'll do a thickness of your upper back and stuff like that, but it's also because the whole movement goes into a very, very much neural output type of movement. The power clean is very explosive, very heavy, but he used to power clean 315, so 140 kilos, go on a standing bench and incline press it. That was one exercise because they had those inclined bench, but that you were not sitting on, you were standing on. So, but you had to take first the weight, power clean it, lean on it, and start incline press it. We don't do that shit anymore. Yeah. So I think that's what bodybuilding lost, honestly, like with the drugs, is that type of training to develop the neural output. But I think that's why you see they're all getting bigger, the physics and stuff like that, but there's a quality that is not quite what they had in the 90s.
So it's not completely what you're talking about right now, but another question is then, because we're talking a lot about the physic talent, right? Is there also a mental talent that some athletes have, but that make them great?
Right, but it's that crazy, that capacity to push past discomfort or to never quit, or it's 1,000-pound yoke carry when my femur started bending. Why didn't I stop?
Yeah.
You should stop. Why would you continue? There's no reason to
do
this shit.
If neural output is that important, do you think then that maybe having a certain personality is even, or at least as important as the physical talent?
Yes, I do believe so. I think when it comes to strength sports or stuff like that, like there's a talent that you have that should direct where you go, which I've been saying for a long time. Like instead of I want to do, like they always say, like especially to women, which I think is extremely harmful, they say you can be everything that you want. And I think that's bullshit. You can be anything that you want, but you can't be everything that you want. You can't be a world-class sprinter and a world-class 5K runner. It's obvious when I say it like that. But if you look, a lot of people are trying to do that. That was a little bit the CrossFit idea, except outside. Oh, there's two cons over there. Look at, sorry, break on the videos, but you guys can't see. But there's two cons, like outside of our window. It's sorry, we're still Europeans. They're still crazy. We're so gringos right now. It's crazy, but it's outside of the window, and they're right there, and it's gorgeous to see. Sorry, sorry about that. I just it kind
how
of
bright it is.
anyway. I know. Yeah,
Call that?
the beak.
You call
I know
it
it's
beak?
crazy. Yeah. Anyway, where was I?
That's really cool.
Right. So personality. I think you have a type of personality that will help you go toward one thing versus the other. For example, if a strength athlete is a sprinter, a bodybuilder is an endurance runner. Same thing. People are good at bodybuilding are endurance people because they can do sets after sets after sets over weeks and months and years, just like an endurance person. And then they clock, they have that obsessive clocking the number of the stuff. Like if you see bodybuilders and endurance runners are very close personality-wise. Whereas, and taking the pain and all that stuff. Whereas if you look at strength athletes, it's every single steps matter. Like there's a very famous video from Captain Kirk. Not Captain Kirk, Kowalski. It was called Captain Kirk. Like the squat didn't start under the bar. He started when you started to approach the squat rack. I told you that story many times, right? Let me see if I need to be set.
Almost.
Yeah, we're good. Like he has an entire video on that, on the setup on the squat. So for him, it's like, and I did that for years, where the empty bar to 500, it started when there was a power cage, right, where I squatted. So the second I entered the power cage, every step that I took was the same. Whether the bar was empty or fully loaded, doesn't matter. I would step a certain number of steps. I would put my left hand, my right hand. I would go under. I would do this, and then I would take back, and I would do this with my foot, and then I would breathe, and then I would squat. Empty bar all the way to fully loaded. Every single rep, every single set was like that. Just like a sprinter, like every single step has to be. Like 3 steps out of the block, you know what you're doing. 10 steps, you know what you're doing. 20 steps, every step has to be controlled. That's a strength athlete. In its mentality of like there's going to be a control of every single thing that happens, and every single thing has to be dealt with at that moment and always. It's a completely different idea of bodybuilding. Is like you miss an exercise, just add to it, volume stuff like. So there's really 2 types of mentality toward training there.
Towards life too, right? Like it's
in general. But if you take that strength athletes and try to put him in bodybuilder, he'll fucking crash. Because he's going to try to do that, which is me. I try to do that every set, every rep for bodybuilding. Well, no, you can't focus on your running technique for 5K. Like at some point, you got to get into a flow. Like 10 seconds, your flow is just going fast, right? 5K, it's 20 minutes. Like you can't just focus on every single step for 20 minutes. It doesn't work like that. So, you know what I mean? Like there's definitely a body type and a personality type toward the type of athletes you should be. Honestly, and personally, I think that's what you should follow. You should follow what your mind is saying, because that's what the neural output is going to develop the most. And after that, it's a matter of what can you recover from. But at the foundation of all this is neural output. Yeah. I think and interestingly, that's what that study was saying, but that's also what I've seen through my training, my coaches, my clients, the history of the sport of the history of the sports of strength, like strongman, powerlifting, all that stuff. You see more or less everything pointing on neural output, the nervous system, which I find very interesting because that's all I've been talking about for 5 years, right? So neural output, okay, so how do we train it, right? That's where I'm going to talk about what I believe is the correct way to go at strength and neural output. So we're talking about assistance work, and I was showing like usually you do a main movement, a carry, supplemental work, assistance work, right? That's still a simple way to look at programming, right? But so main movement, like so what is the main movement for neural output? Well, skill matters a lot. So just on the main movement part, it's a very interesting conversation, which might be all I have time for today. So this podcast might take 2-3 episodes. If we look at the main movement and we go, let's say the deadlift. Is the deadlift the best way to build neural output? I'm choosing the deadlift because the deadlift is based on neural output. You see smaller guys lifting extremely high number. It's less technical than the squat, less relying on hypertrophy than the bench. The deadlift is all neural output. How do you know that? I cannot tell you how many people misloaded the bar, put the incorrect weight, got a PR, didn't know about it. That does not happen on the bench. You do that on the bench, you get pinned. On the deadlift, yet it happens all the time. So that's interesting, right? And that's because it's neural output based. So does that mean, is the deadlift the best way to develop neural output? I would say in the first 1 year or 2 years of someone's career, possibly, right? And if you want to get good at deadlift because of the skill part, you need to deadlift. There's no question. Is that the best way to get strong at the deadlift? That becomes very interesting because skill will always be a limiting factor when it comes to neural output. The higher the skill, the harder it is to generate the neural output. So what you'll see with a lot of athletes, let's say Dan Green was a 220, 242 powerlifter, so 100 kilos to 110 powerlifter, world champion, super built guy. Actually, the dude was a cheerleader in college. Yeah.
That is amazing.
He's the cutest kid. He's white, his wife is black, they have the cutest two kids.
He was a cheerleader?
He was a cheerleader.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so he was one of the leanest, jacked powerlifter out there.
Like
dude had a full-blown six-pack, the whole thing. Extremely strong guy. So he was a sumo deadlifter, right? And he did not build the sumo off the ground. He did it by doing off of blocks, of about 4 inches blocks. And he would work on his sumo block pulling, not off the floor. And the reason he did that is because of hip mobility, obviously, because being higher allowed him to work on his mobility, but also for many reasons. Pulling off of blocks allows you to develop a greater neural output because it's simpler to do.
Just push your weight into the blocks?
Because of a mobility thing, you can put your hips, because the problem with sumo is the first part usually is an internal torque, then you're going to have to switch in external torque. The block allows you to start at external torque. External torque is full explosion, like you
creates
by
more
now,
fight mode,
greater fight mode, sympathetic reaction, neural output, because that's what neural output is. It's the sympathetic side. So to be able to start from, to stay in a sympathetic, which means never go to a hinge into a squat pattern, but into a squat pattern from the beginning, and that's what the blocks are for, to get you exactly at that moment, that sticking point when you're at external torque. So it starts there. That allows him to lower the skill level of the movement, because now there's no sticking point, there's no shift and everything. It's just pull like it's a squat in your hands and just go up, all external torque. So that allowed him, if you see, by lowering the skill level, to increase the neural output. And that's how he built his deadlift. How did I build mine? By doing stiff legs. That's actually when I got my strongest, only 620, so nothing crazy, but I'm a strongman carries first before I just suck at static. But the one time I actually built my deadlift over 600 was when I did first 6 to 8 weeks of Romanian deadlifts, like stiff leg deadlifts. Why? Because low skill. But also low skill allowed me to fight with the weight in a pure hinge, which is what I needed on a deadlift. Because on a deadlift, I get stuck at a very, very specific spot, right? And when I get stuck at that spot, I feel I can't generate any fight. So the key was to learn to develop my neural output in that particular spot. And the best way for me to address it is a stiff leg.
So for the people who are watching this, you can decide what will be a best way for you.
Right. So again, like the first 2 years, if you're new, just deadlift.
Yeah.
Right? But after a while, there might be supplemental exercise that are more interesting for you to do than the deadlift.
You can recognize it in the deadlift movement where you get stuck.
For example, and then so now we're getting into a much more complex conversation, but for example, Bill Starr did this 660 or 700 I think 7. Bill Starr was one of my idols, like strength coach idol. He was an Olympic weightlifter back in the 60s. He was the man. He's one of the early strength coaches who he created the 5x5. That was Bill Starr. Yep. And back then he had the power clean, the bench press, and the squat. He's actually not recognized enough for what he brought to the strength and conditioning. He's a man. And he worked on deadlift without doing deadlifts. He did stiff legs, he did a number of exercises, but he didn't deadlift outside of competition. That can be a little bit dangerous if you don't have a set technique on the deadlift. So
you have to do it after like a few years of lifting.
Right. Or you can have mostly supplemental exercise, and once in a while you make sure you deadlift to make sure you don't lose your technique or stuff like that. But so there are ways to do this. Like mine, for example, 8 weeks of stiff leg deadlift, and then I can do a 2-3 week cycle on the deadlift every week, just to get to see if I'm doing correctly, and then back to it. There are ways to program this after, right? Mm-hmm. But there are supplemental exercises out there that will allow you to work a greater neural output into that particular pattern of movement that might be far more beneficial than the main lift itself. So you could get stronger. At the end, I think it doesn't matter. I think supplemental exercise versus main exercise, the only thing that matters is how much neural output can you generate, and can you recover from it, from that exercise that allow you to generate the neural output. So for the main exercise, it's going to be interesting to see. For example, for me, like for a while, I'm going to go more supplemental exercise because I want to rebuild my deadlift, and I'm going to do stiff leg for 8 weeks, get it back to over 180 kilo, like 200 kilo stiff leg like I used to do. And then we'll see that translates to my deadlift. It did last time. So for example, so that's what I like about that is it'll be a lot less. I can do 3 sets of stiff leg deadlift, feel my back, everything is great, but I'm not nearly as wasted as by doing 3 sets of heavy deadlifts. So recovery wise, it'll be more interesting for me. And if I recover better, neural output is higher over weeks and weeks and weeks of stuff. So you see how things could balance. So that's what I would do in the first as a main movement. I would go toward maybe the supplemental exercise that works the best for you. For the bench press, I can bench press. I like to bench press off of a block, like about 4 inches of my chest. There's less movement of the shoulder. I go less to the traps. I can stay within my lats better, and then it's all triceps, which at the end is what matters for the bench, is the triceps. So off of a block, I just put like a foam roller on my chest and I press off of that. That is by far my favorite type of bench pressing. It doesn't hurt my shoulders. I feel the movement better. I can build a neural output much, much, much higher doing that. That's how I bench 400, was doing it off of blocks. So the 2 things that allowed me to get stronger were not the main lifts themselves. That's not true for everybody, but it does work better for me. At the end, I think it doesn't matter is which one allows you to create the greater neural output. Is it a main lift or is it off of blocks or whatever? I think that's what you should be working on. I think at the end, the secret is neural output. And that is why I would put the carries in the second place. Because you can't create more neural output than on carries. Why? Because the skill level is so low. Carries do everything. That's not the only reason, but it's a main reason is the waist is so low on carries. Waist being weight bearing, eccentric, and skill, right? Less eccentric, less skill, better recovery, more neural output. Same idea. So I put the carries in second place because for 2 reasons. First of all, that it allows you to attack the weight, right? And if you choose the right carries, you can target more the glutes, hammies, or the upper back, or whatever. Let's say you're working the squat, right? If you do your carries, you're going to learn, it's going to develop your obliques like crazy. You're going to develop your upper back like crazy, your capacity to stabilize the weight, your capacity to hold a weight on there. You get used to the weight, which means when you do squats after, any weight will feel like a feather on your back, which helps a lot. A number of reasons, but also carries, it's all like you grab the weight once you have the technique, which is very simple, and you just move forward. And after that is how much do you want it. Your carry is that. You might have to put your eyeballs back in their socket once you're done. But it's get under the weight and just move. Get one foot after the next and go. And a lot of it is that fight mode. I don't think there's a better way to develop a fight mode than with strongman movement. Carries and sleds. That's by far the best way. You want to learn to pull, do rope pulls. You're going to have to use your whole body to pull toward yourself and everything. As far as a row is concerned, it's the best. Row pulls are by far the best rows out there. You can always put dumbbell rows and all that shit, but dumbbell rows, we're going back to that bodybuilding idea. Like if you see bodybuilding now, like their training is, everybody trains the same. It's the same machines. It's the same 5 sets of 10. Everybody trains the same. They take the same drugs, they train the same. Like that's why all the bodies are kind of, I mean, they're all different, but at the end, you don't see like the 70s, 80s type of thing, is because the training is the same. Like we all go to the gym with machines and then you bump 5 sets of 10. There is no neural output component in any of that. You can go to the gym and do those machines without giving a shit, which is mostly what you see. If you see at the global gym, like neural output, give me a fucking break. Like no one finishes a set of rows like making the face I make when I finish my row pulls.
I don't even want to.
Where, you know, like everything is like this, my rear delt and everything is cramping and I got a massive pump and I'm like, Jesus Christ. Whereas people at the gym is...
Well, to the point where when we are in the gym, I feel uncomfortable because we are like there, like sweating and like
making faces,
borderline crying and everything, and
with the other one.
Yeah.
And no one is sweating.
Yeah.
Like what killed me was in Holland. In Holland, I go to train more, and you know, like those thin cotton T-shirts, white. Those show any signs of sweat. If you drop water on it, it makes a mark. Those guys would walk around in those fucking T-shirts, train for an hour, and not have a drop of sweat on their body. And I was like, how the fuck do you do that? I can't even walk around the gym and not sweat. I walk around the gym, I look at the weight, I start sweating.
Yeah.
Like it's my body's like, oh, it's on. Like, and those motherfuckers could just walk around and never sweat. Their hair was perfect too, by the way.
There are people that go to the gym in the morning and then go straight into work, and they just do their hair, makeup before they go to the gym.
Deodorant and they're good.
And I'm like, how can you do your hair, makeup, and everything before the gym, then go to the gym and then go to work?
How do you go and not sweat in the gym?
Yeah, like, I was going to say that means that
like those guys have
you don't sweat or anything.
Cotton T-shirts and don't show a drop of sweat for a full session, a leg workout.
I know.
I'm like, oh, there's something wrong with all of you.
I know.
Okay, so but that shows you is like that's the problem with that, like science into fitness now. Is science what it meant? It just meant selling nutrition and supplements and drugs. And it's true that you can make a lot of progress with just that. But is that the point? And I can tell you that from a strength perspective, you will not get strong doing that shit. You can get hypertrophy that way, which can help on certain things, but there is no question that for strength, there is a specific approach that is required, and that approach goes through neural output. So you're gonna have to learn to fight. And to me, there is no greater fight than the strongman session. So that's why I got known for, is to murder people using the sled. And I mean, and the yoke carries and the farmers and everything, and the sandbag carries, obviously, and all that stuff. But there is no better way to get strong than by doing those movements. Why? Honestly, because the skill level of them allows you to build a monstrous neural output toward a movement. And I think that's what you should focus on. So when we talk about exercise selection and programming, what we should look at is what is the exercise that A, allows you to develop the greater neural output, B, allows you to recover from it.
It's so much more interesting to look at it like that from someone who's more a pro to a beginner, because a beginner can also go way easier into training by just doing the movement and not worry too much about the right technique and the right thing, and
or vice versa. Like at first learn the technique on the deadlift because you're a newbie and you do like you 3 sets of 5, but can you recover from it? I mean, like maybe the main exercise is a bit much, maybe you should spend more time developing your back first. So the ideas are going to be the same, right? But even
if you have someone that is really not capable of, like, for example, squatting, to put him on his sled is like, just go.
At least, I've done
that
so many times.
Out of just
and I've done that so many times. Like you do.
That I find very interesting.
I can teach you the technique on the squat, but you're a newbie, so you squat 185. Right. So once I make you do one set even 2 sets, 3 sets of 3, you still have plenty of energy because it wasn't heavy enough to really challenge you. So we could definitely go on the sled and develop that fight mode there.
So
I still would do it even for an advanced lifter, by the way.
Yeah, but for strongman movements are for everyone basically interesting. That's what's so cool about it.
And that's why I saw at my gym is like, it was everybody from 16 to my 60-year-old clients. And you know who liked it the most? My 50-year-old women clients. Because they're like, oh, I can fuck shit up.
Yeah, I can imagine
they
that.
love that. So
that's what I like about it
at first, I thought I was hesitant to bring because most of the women that I had were older, 40 plus, and I was hesitant to bring them into sales. Oh, you're not going to like it. Turned out they're the one who liked it the most. And they're the one who pushed the most. I love them because I would put the young guys with them, and intensity-wise, they would get their ass kicked because those women, they just wanted to work hard, and you can't work harder than on the sled, so they loved it. But the low skill meant there was no thinking, which is very important when it comes to women. Like, don't make them think too much, otherwise, it's a nightmare. I mean, so try to reduce the skill as much as you can. Yes, I'm sexist, sure. I've trained enough women, I can say it. But you guys think way too much. Way too much. Guys are dumb. They don't think. That's why they do better. Like, you can get upset at me all you want. You all know it's true. So I would just put them on the sled and then they would just murder it. And then they feel, like I didn't have to explain where to feel the movement.
Yeah.
You do a sled, your legs burn.
It's very
simple, practical. Like you do a drag, where do you feel that? Your VMO is exploding. Yeah, pretty much. Feel the glutes? Yeah. Like I want, honestly, everybody knows that one. And then, you walk funny and your legs are burning. There's no better way to train than carries and sleds. That doesn't mean you don't want to do that main movement. Right, because static strength also matters. I have a huge bias when it comes to carries because I'm better at it. And I'm not good at static, obviously. But I still think, like the main part of my workout is that second exercise, the carry. That's where I'm going to do the main because I need to get stronger statically. But the second I get to the carry is when I put it. So could you mix the two? For example, there are ways to do that. You could do farmer's walk. With a low pickup, you're going to work the deadlift part of it, and then you're still going to carry. So you could carry, drop it, deadlift, drop it, and then do back and forth. That puts 5 deadlift with a lot of carries in between. You could mix the two like that. I mean, you could do that with a heavy sandbag carry where you have to squat one time on each corner. So there are many, many ways to do this. But you could see how that combination main movement carry is how you get strong. It's called farming, by the way, too. But
I still believe that's why I'm naturally strong. It's from my mom's side.
Yeah, exactly. It's the farmer side, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's the key to get strong is neural output. Therefore, it's main movement, but then carries, sled. That's the main one. After that, we can start talking about supplemental movements, extra supplemental movements, if that's your main, assistance work, hypertrophy, all that stuff, yes. Matters a lot, by the way. And the technical aspect of lifting, right? You have to get good at the technical aspect of lifting as well. But the main thing, the base of the pyramid, to me is neural output. And that means carries and sleds. Main movements are important, obviously. I don't think they have to be squat, bench, deadlift. I think stiff leg can replace the deadlift. I think Anderson squat can replace the squat. I like to bench off of blocks. So, you know what I mean? After that, like, when it comes to static, like, we're going to have to see where you are and what's more beneficial for you. Because, again, you're going to have to recover from it, right? So, but even for the main, I would go, what is exercise where you can build the best neural output for that main movement? Again, for me, the greatest fight I could do was on a stiff leg deadlift. By far, the Romanian deadlift, I get to fight on that bench. Every single inch, I get to fight it. On a deadlift, I don't have the same, I can't focus the same, probably because of the skill component. And again, doing carries and sled, there is no skill. So you just go. And so for me, the greatest fight mode ever was still that sled with a harness.
Yeah.
And
well, everything sled is
just murder. But if you do like heavy short, oh my God, the amount of fight you have to bring. And what I love about this is there's no place in that set where you can fuck off mentally. Like you have 20 meters heavy, you're gonna have to focus every single step of it. Because if you at any moment don't, you're done. You can't do it. So it requires a total commitment
And I think
toward the lift.
for your clients, it's also very interesting to put them on the sled to see if they mentally quit, how much of
That's
a
true.
mental aspect it is that they fail, stuff like that.
And you know what? He just reminded me of something. There's a way to program for a class as well, because this is the fitness today. It's class versus one-on-one.
What I was thinking when when I said about people who are really not advanced at fitness, like if you just make them do a strongman class based, it's so much easier, I think,
they love it
to coach
so
it.
much.
And
again, if it's neural output, and by the way, loving it will help so much.
Yeah.
Right? And so the main lifts with the stiff leg and stuff like that, if you have a class of 10 people, it's going to be hard to coach. Like benching off of a block, that's hard to coach. Anderson squat, that can be hard to coach. Like even sumo off of blocks.
You just simply don't have the time to help them enough, and
it's
even
hard.
though that's not, you should have the time to help them.
But it doesn't matter.
But
the reality of it is not that. Yeah, it's not the reality.
So
of
if you don't have the time for it, don't go into it, right?
That becomes but there's also what people want versus what people need. You can't give people what they need until you give them what they want. That's just the reality of the situation. So we can start playing with that, where we don't maybe put as much effort toward the main movement. They don't know that, as we will toward the carries. But for example, if I want to teach you to deadlift, farmer's walk, I'll make you pick from a low pick, and then I'll make you carry, but every time you carry, you have to pick it up first.
Yeah.
There's your deadlift portion. So maybe I can do sandbag squats as a main movement, just to get the hammies and glutes going, maybe a little bit wide, stuff like that, low skill, and then I get you into farmer's carry. If I do those two, I destroy your posterior chain. I've taught you to pick something off the floor, which is the point of deadlifting for 99.9% of people, because most of them will not compete. I teach you to pick correctly off the floor using not just your legs, but your back as well, because you don't want to use your legs, you want to use your legs, your glutes, your back, everything. You want to use your body to pick something off the ground, not just your legs. I've taught you to do that, and I've engaged all the muscle in the carry. Why? Because you have to switch from left to right. Each side is like a coil, and then you're going to load the coil on each side as you carry. So you're going to do the obliques in a way that you never done on a machine or stuff like that. And then, like your pecs have to squeeze to stabilize when you walk from one side. Same thing with the traps, and then the shoulder, and the stuff. So there's advantages to carries you will not find anywhere else.
And I think the fill is way lower on the carry. Right?
Well, what is the skill exactly? Hang on to, once you know where to put it on your hands, and you know to take small steps. That's it. Like don't overarch, so don't fuck yourself like arching or whatever. Do the douchebag pose and then move forward. Like it takes me 10 minutes to teach that.
Yeah.
Within 10 minutes, I can have a full class doing farmer's carry, which will develop the entire posterior chain and more, to degrees that it will require me 5 exercises static in the gym to do, and with much, much, much higher skill. So main movement carries, done. That's how you get strong. Like again, not the only thing, because we're going to need the skill, we're going to need the hypertrophy and all that stuff. Okay, but the base of the pyramid, the structure of the pyramid is still the same. It's neural output and structure. If you have a strong structure, because neural output is that energy that you put, right? Yeah. Your body has to be able to handle the weight. Right, so you carry, you're still going to have the soft tissue, the muscle, all that stuff ready. So, but again, how do you build that up? The best way is carries. So at the end, the base of the pyramid, which is structure and neural output, you find that in strongman, which is why I've been using those movements for so long. My body knows that it's better. And if I want to learn to wrestle a bear, I'm not going to use the machine at the local global gym. I'm going to use a big ass sandbag. I'm going to use strongman implements, because that's what makes you like strong. Look at how they're built. They're built like those ancient Greek statues. If you look at the statues of Hercules, first thing you notice, his obliques are that thick. Like if you look at David, he has a very small waist. He was more like, beautiful, but not strong. Then you see a statue, all Greek statues of Hercules. Right away, what you see is not necessarily thicker waist, but a way thicker obliques. Not more of a six-pack, just thicker in the obliques. They knew where strength-wise. The back was thicker, like not necessarily larger pecs, but the guy had like what is called the yoke, which is that H form that the upper body has. It's like the back into the traps, into the obliques, into the glutes. That's what you see that is being developed into the hammies. That's where the strength is. All of those are developed by carries. That's the base of the pyramid, is strength and neural output. Sounds good? All right, so we can maybe elaborate a bit more in another podcast, but right now the camera is going to shut off again, so that will be...
Talk for an hour. I think there will be enough mind blow for this episode.
For episode 2632. And then we shall see you guys next week. Bye everybody.